In a bustling city surrounded by high stone walls and winding streets, there lived a merchant named Caleb. Caleb was known for his success, his wealth, and his ambition. His shop overflowed with fine goods, silks from the east, spices from distant lands, and jars of gold and silver that sparkled in the sunlight. Yet for all his riches, Caleb was restless. He often found himself staring at his treasures, feeling a strange emptiness that all his wealth could not fill. One day, while Caleb was arranging his wares, an old man entered the shop. He was dressed in a plain robe, his sandals dusty from travel. Despite his humble appearance, there was something commanding about his presence. He carried with him a simple clay jar, unadorned and worn. "Good day to you, merchant," the old man said. "I have a gift to offer." Caleb raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "A gift? What could you possibly have that I, of all people, would need?" The old man smiled, setting the clay jar on the counter. "This," he said. Caleb laughed. "A plain jar. I have shelves lined with jars far finer than this one. Why would I want it?" The old man's eyes gleamed. "Because this jar has the power to make you truly rich, but only if you can fill it." Caleb's laughter faded as curiosity took hold. "Fill it? With what?" "That is for you to discover," the old man replied. "Take the jar, Caleb. Consider it a challenge." Before Caleb could ask further questions, the old man turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowded street. Caleb stared at the jar, its simplicity an insult to his lavish surroundings. Yet he couldn't shake the old man's words. With a shrug, he took the jar home and placed it on his finest table, vowing to fill it and prove the man wrong. The next day, Caleb began his task. He filled the jar with gold coins, but as he placed the lid on, the jar grew warm to the touch. When he opened it, the coins had vanished. He tried again, this time with pearls and gemstones, but the result was the same. No matter what he placed inside, precious metals, jewels, rare spices, the jar refused to remain full. Frustrated, Caleb sought advice from his peers. Some suggested filling it with rare objects, while others proposed items of sentimental value, but nothing worked. "Perhaps it is broken," Caleb muttered. "Or perhaps the old man tricked me." But deep down, he felt there was more to the jar than he understood. Weeks turned into months, and Caleb's obsession with the jar grew. He became so consumed with trying to fill it that he neglected his business. Customers began to visit less frequently, and soon his once thriving shop became quiet and empty. One day, as Caleb sat staring at the jar, his door creaked open. A beggar stood there, thin and frail, clutching his stomach in hunger. "Please, kind sir," the beggar said. "I haven't eaten in days. Can you spare a morsel of food?" Caleb sighed. His pantry was stocked, but his frustration with the jar left him in no mood for charity. Still, something tugged at his heart. With a reluctant nod, he fetched a loaf of bread and handed it to the beggar. The man's eyes lit up with gratitude. "God bless you," he said before leaving. As Caleb returned to the table, he noticed something strange. The jar, which had been empty moments ago, now held a small piece of bread. His heart raced. Could it be? The next day, Caleb decided to test the jar. He gave a poor widow a bag of grain, and later, he found a handful of wheat in the jar. A child in the marketplace needed sandals, so Caleb bought him a pair. That evening, a small leather strap appeared inside the jar. Slowly, Caleb began to understand. The jar was not meant to be filled with riches, but with acts of kindness and generosity. The more he gave, the more the jar seemed to reflect his deeds. Over time, Caleb changed. His once proud heart softened, and his focus shifted from hoarding wealth to helping others. He gave freely to the poor, repaired homes for the needy, and shared meals with strangers. Each act brought him a joy he had never known. The jar began to overflow, not with gold or silver, but with symbols of his kindness: loaves of bread, sprigs of herbs, simple trinkets that told the story of his newfound purpose. One evening, as Caleb was closing his shop, the old man returned. He smiled as he saw the jar, now full and glowing softly. "You've learned the secret," the old man said. Caleb nodded, tears in his eyes. "It wasn't the jar that needed filling," he said. "It was my heart." The old man placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Wealth, true wealth, is not measured by what you keep, but by what you give. You have discovered this truth, and now you are richer than you ever imagined." Caleb tried to thank the man, but before he could speak, the old man vanished, leaving behind only the warmth of his presence. From that day on, Caleb's life was transformed. His shop became a place of refuge, where the needy could find help and the weary could rest. The jar remained on his table, a reminder of the lesson he had learned, that generosity, guided by faith, brings blessings far greater than any treasure. And though Caleb's wealth had diminished, his heart was full, for in giving to others, he had found what he had been searching for all along, a life of purpose, joy, and peace. The story of Caleb and the jar spread far and wide, inspiring others to look beyond their possessions and live with open hands and open hearts. And though the old man was never seen again, the lesson he brought lived on, a quiet reminder of God's call to love and serve one another.